Welcome to Girl Dad, the podcast. I'm your host, Madeline Anderson, and I started this podcast to give fathers the tools to understand and connect with their daughters. Dads, you have such an impact on your daughters. I'm here to support you by providing the daughter's perspective and bringing on experts and guests to help you raise happy, healthy, and confident daughters. All right, Girl Dads, let's get into it. Jen Elledge, welcome to Girl Dad, the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on. So you built your entire business around something that is very infamous, and it's the talk. the talk that people are scared to give, scared to receive during that kind of awkward puberty phase. And I'm super excited to have you on to dive deeper into this subject and help dads understand what daughters go through during puberty and all kinds of other fun discussions. But before we begin, I would love for you to kick this off by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit more about your business with the Talk Institute, what you do, why you started this, and where you're from.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I want to say I think it's so great that you have a podcast like this for dads. It's such a unique perspective. And I know that there's definitely some things that I wish my dad would have known, or, he could have, helped me a little bit more with. So I'll make sure to weave some of those in today too. So, but where I got started, where did I come from? Gosh, where does we start with that? So I thought I was going to be a therapist, when I was like in school. And so I went that track for a while, and I met this teacher that taught, a bunch of psych classes, and she also taught human sexuality. And because I liked her so much, I took everything she taught. And so that was like kind of leaned me that way, I guess, is what happened at first. And she used to have as a psych classes, she used to have us like do these workshops in her human sexuality classes. And I loved it. And long story short, she got me a job at the college later on. So I taught human sexuality at a college level for 7 years, and did a bunch of stuff in the community. And I worked with teens, um, I actually met somebody who worked for an organization that taught a parent-child program. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. That is like what I could have used. I wish that my mom was talking to me more, and like my dad said something too. And so there was a lot of, I was excited about that. And so that was how I got introduced to the idea of a parent child program. I wish I could say I made it up. I really honestly do. I wish I had the idea, but obviously it's become mine over 20 years now. But so I started, kind of with the curriculum that they had, and I ran their program for 5 years. I had like, I don't know, 15 instructors. We were all over Orange County, teaching this stuff to a bunch of families. They lost some funding, so I branched off and I started the Talk in 2007. And I was just thinking about this. I was like, oh my God, next year is 20 years.
Wow.
20 years. That's on my own, not including the time before that. I was doing a bunch of stuff. So that's a
Wow.
nutshell.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. What you're doing is so important. And for context, I know Jen through my tennis team. I've never met you personally yet, but there are so many women on my tennis team who have brought their kids, sons and daughters, to the Talk and just rave about you and the way that you present material and provide information and understanding to both the children and adults. So yeah, I think this is just really fascinating, and it's something that some of the dads in the audience have actually asked me to speak on. So I wanted to honor that and was really excited to get connected with you and hear more about the actual programming and, some of your takeaways and some advice for fathers when it comes to communication around this type of subject. But before we get into all that, I would love to just kind of set the scene of when you're giving this talk and you're walking into a room of parents and children. And, I mentioned earlier, this is kind of a scary and like infamous conversation, but And those words are heavy, but I think it's true. I think this is super awkward for a lot of people, and a lot of dads listening may be thinking, "Oh my gosh, do I even wanna listen to the rest of this episode? Because it could be uncomfortable." But it's, yeah, I just wanna hear from you on, like, how you shift the energy, what it feels like when you first walk in there or when people first come in, and how you kind of navigate this uncomfortable or commonly uncomfortable, topic.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely can feel like a hostage situation when I walk in for the kids especially. They're like, "What are we doing here? We're gonna talk about what?" So, to set the scene, typically my program is done with like 10 or more kids and a parent is with them. So, it could be mom or dad, but, anyhow, what happens when I walk in is they don't know what to expect. Everyone's a little nervous. Everyone expects to be embarrassed or this to be awkward, and it will be if we don't practice talking about it. That's the thing, is like we forget that talking's a skill. And I think a lot of parents, are well intentioned or meaning, want to be there, and but they don't teach the skill of how to talk about hard things. So, like for example, I hear this story from parents all the time. As my parent gave me a book and said, "If you have any questions, just ask."
Mhm.
And none of us do. And why don't we? It's not that we don't have questions, it's because we don't know how to ask them. We haven't ever been in that situation before. We never talked about something embarrassing or awkward before. So that's what's nice about a group environment is it makes you do it. It makes you practice. And we're so busy, like it's hard to sit down and have all the talks we know we need to have. I think it's just a nice way to do it because you're also bringing community together too. It's not just you talking at your kid. It's like, oh, there's other kids learning this too, and yeah, they're talking with their parent, and it doesn't have to be weird or uncomfortable. So you're modeling. There's so much modeling that goes on,
Mm.
and for parents too, they get to see how to talk about this and feel more empowered as well. Because probably a lot of us didn't learn much from our parents growing up, right? I mean, a lot of us, like, our parents didn't hit the mark on this. And I think that's kind of makes us feel ill prepared as we hit this situation or, this milestone in our kids' lives, right? We feel a little ill prepared because maybe like our parents didn't get it right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I love that you are able to take those questions that people are having but don't really ask, and you almost ask for them, right? Like, you're providing all this information to them, and they may answer those questions that they're unable to ask because they don't know how to ask them or they feel awkward asking them, but you're
sure.
there to deliver what they need to know. So, yeah, I think it's just a wonderful format that you're using.
One more thing. I don't know that I
Yeah.
fully answered your question. I think what makes the energy shift is how two things. And my biggest gift isn't really what they're learning, to be honest. Like,
Mhm.
they don't remember everything. Like some of it, like they think they get, but I'm like, wait, that's not what I said when we play games and things like that. I'm like, no, no, that's not right. So, but what the biggest gift that it is it's the tone. And really, that's what we want to do as parents, okay? Is we want to set the right tone, okay?
Mhm.
Is it something good that happens to my body or something embarrassing, awkward, and weird and I should be scared about? And a lot of us anticipate that to be hard, and we might, because 'cause we're expecting it, in some ways we project that, and we
Mhm.
might even create it in some ways, not meaning to, or we think that our child's gonna have the same experience we had, and really that's not true, or doesn't have to be, right?
Yeah.
So, if it was traumatizing for you, you kinda have that lens. You're like, "Oh my gosh, puberty is gonna be so hard," and you're thinking that, and guess what? It is if you don't have the right tools and you don't have the right information, right? So
Mhm.
it's kind of, I think that's the biggest thing is the tone, um, and I use humor to shift that, to
Mm.
be approachable, and I use humor. I try to not like, just be light about things, and kind of,
Right.
make it easier to talk about, and we definitely play lots of games, and that's a great thing to do with your kids too. If you wanna talk about something, um, it's best to, like, do something at the same time, right? Like,
Mhm.
do a puzzle together or, go for a walk or go for a car ride. Car ride's infamous for a reason. You don't have to look at your kid,
Right.
right? Yeah, that's better to be, a little bit of that, just so they don't see any, expression if you're having any
Mhm.
embarrassment yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, that's great advice, and yeah, and so one of my favorite things about this podcast and what I do is helping men understand women and women understand men. And for dads who are listening, and I've actually been requested this, but for men in the audience, they would love to know, you know, what's going on in their daughter's mind and body as this transition happens. So if you're a dad and you have, this sweet little girl and she's now kind of becoming a young woman, what
Yeah.
is actually going on in her body and what is shifting in her mind that dad should be aware of when this infamous time happens?
Sure. I think a lot of times parents are waiting for clues to talk about this, right? And that's okay. It's not terrible, but oftentimes when you see the clue, it's already like been happening for a while,
Mm,
right? You're like, so for example, you're going to feel puberty before you see it. Okay. So
mm,
what I mean by that, you're going to feel your child's emotions, the wave of emotions. Okay, the sex hormones are particularly strong during puberty, and they come in waves. And so what will happen is when they are strong, they can affect our mood, and that's for boys too. Don't get it wrong that just because they don't have a period doesn't mean they don't have fluctuations in their hormones, right? And affects their moods as well. Okay, but for women, what boys, let me say this, what parents often notice, this is a joke we say, okay? Puberty started by the sound of a slamming door,
mm.
okay? They get tude. Your kid gets attitude with you, and you're like, "What is wrong with you?" Or they're crying at the drop of a hat. You're like, wow, that's a lot of feelings about something like this, right? And you're sometimes caught off guard by the intensity of the emotions, and that's from the hormones too. They're so strong that like they just cause these very strong feelings at times. I like to call them the mads, the sads, and the glads. Uh, so you have to kind of ride that wave with your child and try not to make every time they're doing it about power, okay?
Mhm.
Like, sometimes we're like, "Don't talk to me like that, young lady." Yeah, or get really like, gosh, like, let's let the do you hear yourself, right? And so,
Mhm.
maybe you can even, like, when you're not in that moment, create a code word as a family, even for each other. It's kind of fun to be like, code red or something, right? Like, we need and I need a change of tone, like something kind of code for like a change of tone, but don't take it personally, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So it's not a power thing all the time. uh,
Mhm.
don't make it one all the time. So sometimes you might need to just kind of just be like, oh, sounds like it feels like you're having some big feelings today, and you can say something like that, not like, don't downplay your feelings, but they can say something like big, right? These are kind of big
Mhm.
feelings today. And give them tools and time to relax, space, and then come back and talk later. Okay. So when they're in a moment and it's like, if you stub your toe and it really, really hurts, it's not the time to like say, really get a good, I'm sorry, right? You're in the moment, you're hurting, right? You're like, just leave me alone, right? Wait a little bit and come back. And then you can say, hey, so earlier, this is going on. What do you want to talk about that now? Okay. So, and that's good modeling for them too, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great analogy. I mean, dang, stubbing your toe can hurt so bad right away. And then, like, a couple minutes later, you forgot it even happened. It's really no big deal.
Right.
That is so accurate for the way sometimes us girls and women, our feelings feel. It's like very immense feelings, right away. And after a little bit of a cool down period, it's forgotten. Like it's not in our mind at all anymore. So that's really interesting. And yeah, something to keep in mind. And I think the biggest thing that when I think about the hormonal cycle for women too, so when it comes to dads, if you're married to have a wife, like that applies there and also for the daughter. But um the just the idea of giving grace, it's sometimes it's not even about you at all. It is just hormones. Like it is just a drop of hormones or a rise of hormones or something going on in a woman's cycle that causes a serious reaction that
Right.
she doesn't even want to feel, doesn't actually probably think what she's feeling, but she's very much feeling it.
Yes.
And I know it's different for
Irritation.
men. Yes.
Irritation and being annoyed or frustrated really easily. Yeah, that's a big.
Yes, exactly, and it's not something that we wanna feel, but it just is what it is, and it's really driven by the hormones, so, yeah, just really interesting how we're so different and how that's different from how men experience life, and so I think sometimes it can feel like an attack or, it really is directed at them, like they did something wrong, and now it's eliciting this type of reaction when really, it could just be a dip in hormones, and these are the words that come out, but, um,
Right.
yeah, I think, it's a great conversation to have, and speaking of conversations around this, you have mentioned to me on a previous chat how it's best to even have lots of little talks rather than just like this one big talk where you sit your daughter down and tell her everything about puberty and sex and hormones and all of it. So I would love to hear more about that and any advice that you have around how dads can actually navigate these kinds of conversations, especially if they're not, sending them to your talk and they are going to do this internally with or without their partners and just wanting to make sure that this message really lands for the daughter.
Yeah. Let me start by saying this. I think a lot of parents in general, but maybe even a little more skewed more towards dads, tend to feel ill equipped to talk about puberty to a child of the other sex. I feel like a lot of times they'll default to the other parent. Okay, they'll say, "Oh, well, daughters should learn about like their stuff from mom because like I don't have a period, so I don't know anything about that." And so there's this feeling of like they're not capable of being helpful, and that's so not true. Okay, well, that's so not true. What happens if your daughter, yeah, or I'm sorry, your wife or your partner is on a trip and out of town, and your daughter gets her cycle? Like, of course you can help her. You can take her to Target. Of course you can, you know, get her a change of clothes or help her stay calm or get a female on the phone for her if she wants to talk to another person or whatever it is. Like, don't I don't want dads to feel like they don't have a role here because they don't have the same body. Okay?
Mhm.
You have an equal role in talking to your every parent, each parent has to be talking to their kids about this. It's not one or the other, okay? And it's the same thing with like it's not just school or home. It needs to be both. The messages need to come from both because kids will get it from different places, right? And sometimes it
Mhm.
lands in one and not the other. And kids do hear others sometimes differently than their parents. So that's why you want that other voice, an aunt, an extended family. Like those people are so helpful to help you with these talks. Okay. So if you're feeling like your child's not hearing you, that's your workaround. Okay. That's
Mhm.
your workaround. Now back to your question. Sorry, I wanted to say that really quick. So you said something about like how to know when to have these talks. Is that what it was? how to
Yeah,
begin
and just the idea of having multiple talks throughout time
mutual
rather
talk.
than one the talk.
Sure. This is like this is a lifelong thing, right? I mean, we
Mhm.
start early, even like as babies, we're teaching our kids things about touch, right? We're telling them, teaching them proper body part names and stuff, right? Or we can be, that's an option, right? And then as they get a little bit older, we need to teach them bodily autonomy. That's a big thing. Okay, so like a little talk or a way you teach that is by like letting your child know that they're the boss of their body. They get to say yes or no to touch, okay? And they have to ask that of others too. And so you can talk about like little things like I've heard families say, teach their kids something called a no-no box. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
No.
your no-no box is the square here, like covers your bathing suit area. This is the part of your body that nobody touches unless, like, you say it's okay or it's a doctor, or, you know what I mean, or your parent has to help you with something, right?
Hmm.
Like that, okay? But, like, there's little things like that, like, little talks you can have, and they work up, right? They're gonna probably ask you where babies come from or be curious about babies. I think an easy way to talk about that a first talk would be to talk about animals first, reproduction
Mm.
in other species first, and then talk about mammals next. And then you weave into, oh, yeah, that's what humans are, right? And that's a great way, like when they're young, to kind of teach them a little at a time. Okay. You can't, you're not going to talk about sex the same way to a 5-year-old that you would to a 13-year-old. That
Mhm.
makes sense, right? He has to build. And so when they're young, you just don't want to lie. Okay. A lot of times when we're not ready for questions our kids have, we feel like, should I tell him? And then sometimes we lie, and that's not what you want to do. That's like one of the worst
Mhm.
things to do. The better thing than to go there is to be simple.
Mm.
You don't have to say everything. Be simple in your answer, but don't lie. Because if you lie and they find out later it wasn't true, now you're not like a good person to go to with questions. Not going to necessarily give them the truth. You're not being honest, right? Not being truthful. So the way sometimes parents too feel like, I don't know how much to say. And that's another thing. So when you're short and sweet in your answer, you just shut up and you wait and you see how they handle it. And you'll know if it's enough because they won't ask any more questions. They'll
Mm.
run off and do something else. Like, okay. And they're like, go play with their dolls again or whatever they're doing. Okay. But if it wasn't enough, you're going to get, but what if, does that mean, okay, you're going to get something else. And that means they're ready for more. And that's an invite to talk about more. And if your kid
Mhm.
asks questions, congratulations, that is great. That's half the battle is like, how do I bring this up? So
Mhm.
if that is happening, that is fantastic. Encourage that and always praise that. When your kid one of the like the best lines you could write down or like say to your kid, okay, is that is such a good question. I love when you come to me with your questions.
Mm.
Okay, so you're encouraging and reinforcing that behavior that they're gonna go to you first because you want them coming to you before Google, don't you? They might find out a lot more. And maybe not what they might find things they weren't looking for too, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah. That's so powerful. Being able to have open communication with your child and invite them to come to you is good for them too, just for a sense of trust and security and safety within the family. Like I can come to my parents for this. I can come to my parents when I have questions about anything. They're receptive, they're loving, they care to give me an answer. Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. You did say something that was interesting about, you're gonna speak to your 5-year-old about sex differently than your 13-year-old. And I would love to kind of zoom in on that. How how should dads or how can dads, because it's different for everyone, I'm sure, um, how can they talk about it to a 5-year-old versus a 13-year-old? Like, do you have any advice on specific things to say, what to avoid saying, what to make sure that they take away? Like, as an expert in this field, what do you think is the best way to navigate that?
Yeah, I think like with younger, right? I think there's tons of great books out there that are great tools too. And if you're looking for resources in addition to courses, I have a bunch of book reviews. I have a bunch of other resources on my website. I have a free parenting class, and there's a one that's specifically for dads in there. That's 15 minutes. So you're doing the podcast, you can do another 15 minutes on just this for dads, where I go through like the nitty gritty of what's changing. If you really want to know like the physiology stuff and
Mm,
emotionally what's going on, and real tips on like a little more in-depth stuff about what to say and not to say, that's in there. Okay, so that's helpful too for you to know about. um, as far as like language goes, I think again, just being simple with a 5-year-old, you're going to say something, uh, simple, right? So depending on what they've learned so far, hopefully they know body parts, right? And teaching your children the parts, and that you can use nicknames if you want, but make sure that they also know the correct terms. Because what I have found is like sometimes if there's like abuse happening, if they use a nickname, it can get missed. Okay,
hmm,
especially with girl anatomy. Okay, like someone touched my cupcake. You're like, oh, well, tell them to leave that's your, you know what I mean? You might say, like, don't touch my
mm,
cupcake, but they might miss that they weren't talking about food.
mm.
Does that make sense? Because there's a lot of
Yeah.
like little terms, especially about female anatomy. Okay, they're either really vulgar or they're really sweet and innocent, and sometimes those things get messed with the anatomy. Anyways, when you're talking about sex, you might just say something simple like, the way that mammals reproduce, right? First of all, what makes a mammal? So it would say like they have live births, right? They have hair, right? And then the other way that another thing that makes mammals mammals is the way they reproduce, and they reproduce by having something called sex. And this is a word that is short for a longer word. And this is how I explain it in my class, actually. I'm
Mhm.
telling you, I explain it to 9 to 12.
Yeah.
It's short for longer words. It's short for sexual intercourse. And intercourse is a fancy way of talking about, or is a fancy word for when somebody's body enters another person's body. That's super close, right? And that's something that people should think a lot about and be really picky about who they do something like that with, right? We're talking about humans, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and this is something that, people should both want to be doing together and kind of weave in consent, right? This shouldn't be just one person's idea. Okay. I think what happens with dads sometimes when they start talking about sex to their girls, they're thinking like a boy, right? And they're thinking like, all boys want is this, right? And sometimes I have memories of my dad saying things like that to me. All boys want is sex, and, never do this or they'll always do that. And so there'll be these like all or nothing statements. Okay. And when you have a teen, now if you're getting older now, you're becoming a teen, part of their brain development is to start to like question authority, and they start to look for like exceptions to rules and things like
Mm.
that. And so what happens, you're saying always, or all boys, and they're thinking, well, I have a friend and he's not like that. And they're so stuck on that they totally
Mhm.
miss what you're saying.
Wow.
Okay. It can get super mess. It did for me. It did
Mhm.
for me. I remember being like, I just wanted to fight with my dad about like, that's not true. This what he was saying was like, that might be a leading factor. So you can still say something like that, but don't use all or nothing, and just say like, there are boys out there who this is what's most important to them, and they might lead with this, right? And they're more interested in being physical than having a relationship. Like, if that is something that you want to teach your daughter, okay, that's a better way of going about it, is watching the
Mhm.
language around it than saying, all boys want is this. Right? So, just a quick little tip of just like how to finesse the language a little bit on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think there's such an art for delivering this kind of message, and it comes with a few kind of key points. And one of them is that, like the no absolute statements, and really just kind of keeping it a general conversation about sometimes this happens or other times this happens, because I think it also helps the daughter understand that each experience is unique. And so if she's only hearing absolute statements, and if that she actually is resonating with it rather than kind of like drifting off and thinking about the exceptions, then she might think, well, then that's going to be my one and only experience, right? And that's not necessarily true. So I think that that's a really good point. And another thing to kind of think about and talk about, is when it comes to this art of the conversation, is how it's delivered. So, like the tone of your voice, for sure. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that, and then also kind of the difference between as a father talking at your daughter rather than talking with her, because this is a very vulnerable conversation for both parties, right? It's not just uncomfortable for the dad or just uncomfortable for the daughter. This is like foreign territory that for the first time you're talking about something that is maybe a little bit uncomfortable. And so yeah, just would love to hear from you on how to navigate that art of the delivery.
Sure. So, in addition to your tone, you want to have a really great poker face too,
Mm,
because they are also reading your body and your how comfortable or uncomfortable you appear to be. So, something kind of funny, I'll tell a little story. I was at Sky Zone like yesterday or the day before, and my son was playing with a little girl. And, parents kind of hang out and helicopter over their kids the whole time, right? So we're hanging out watching our kids. And I said this to the dad. I said, "This is gonna sound really weird. Because like I'm just meeting you, but I'm gonna be on a podcast for dads this week. I know you have a daughter. I know she's only 5. But can I ask you a personal question?" And he was like, "Oh no, what are you doing? Are you crazy lady?" But I did talk to him a little bit, and I asked him, I'm like, "So, like, when you think about this talk and like your role and like like what do you imagine it's going to look like, or what?" uh, what I don't remember exactly what I said, but I said like, "How are you going to handle it?" kind of thing.
yeah.
And he was like, immediately got embarrassed. And then I felt, like, kinda bad, I put him on the spot, but it showed me also how much embarrassment he already is having about thinking about that, right? Because it wasn't just, like, being asked that, like, as he was talking about it too, there was some, like, hesitation about, like, and feeling very unequipped for that
Mhm.
moment. And he
Mhm.
said I would just have my wife do it, and that's why I said that earlier. It reminded me that there is this, like, deferring to the other parent a lot of times, and so, he had said that, but some of the things he had said was, he'd wanna be able to know a little more about, like, what exactly is going on, like, what the changes are and how to like, what to
Mhm.
look for and how to time when the period might come, like how to know when she's gonna get her period kind of thing, okay? So, so really quick, just like if you don't watch my video on my free class, one thing that is good to know is, remember I said that the slamming door is when it's
Mhm.
the other thing you'll notice, one of the first physical changes that you'll see oftentimes will be breastfeeding. Okay, so once the breasts begin to bud, you got about 2 years ish before the menstrual cycle begins. That's what most
Mm.
pediatricians will say. Okay. So if you're looking for that, you can see like that's kind of not like the best indicator of like 2 years is a long time out. Okay. But once you start seeing some like physical changes, hair in new places, right? Breastfeeding, several growth spurts, she should have like something in her backpack if she's
Mm,
at
mhm,
school that she
mhm,
has like a little kit. And so one thing you could do to prepare your daughter is get her a little kit, like, literally just go to, like, the Dollar Tree or something simple, okay, and just get her, like, some deodorant and, a little brush and some cute little things too, right? So she feels like it's kind of fun, but then also pick up a couple of pads and panty liners to put in there. I think it's good to put a Ziploc with a pair of underwear for underwear because,
mm, mhm,
right? I mean, you're gonna ruin your underwear when you get your period, so you have some fresh ones to put on. Right? So you can make a little kit, have her be prepared, tell her what to do, if she's at school, she should go to the nurse, right? Um, put something around her waist, right? If she gets a leak,
mhm,
just to get home or to not have others see it until she gets a change of clothes, right? So I know dads aren't going to be thinking about those things because, that's not the experience they're not the puberty change they have, but there are similar things always that like you could understand, right? So like for girls, getting a leak at school would be super embarrassing. And so like in my classes, like when I teach kids about this and they learn about each other, I'll talk about like for boys, what's could be super embarrassing about them. They might get an erection at school, and, like, what if someone saw and told everyone about it? That would be so embarrassing. Same goes for girls. So sometimes
mm,
helping your kiddos understand, like, you're all going through things and
mhm,
helping them, like, an equivalent of that. So for dads, same with you. Even though you don't have a woman's body, there are equivalent experiences that you have
mhm,
had that you could still share, that you could still reflect on to help you understand more or, be there or anticipate things for your daughter, right? There's little things like that. Um, and I think as far as like, you want to just, it's not that you don't have to know what to say all the time.
mhm,
What you just need to let your daughters know is that they can go to you, that you can be there, you're approachable. And it's more than you saying it. You need to say it, still say it, but you got to show it. Okay. And so you show it when you're talking about like, how do you show up? You have your poker face. Okay. And you watch your tone. So your tone, and so I actually have this framework. It's called Answering Any Difficult Question framework. You can download it on my website too. And the first step is poker face. Okay. Right. So let's say, I'll give you a real example of a parent. This is a story. She's told me that she felt like she messed up. Okay. Her daughter came home from school one day and she was in the kitchen and she said, Mom, what's this? Are you ready for this gesture? She said, what's this?
Oh, no. For the listeners, it was, an inappropriate mouth gesture
Yes.
with
Yes.
her tongue pushing her cheek out of one side and her hand, on the other side, so,
Yeah.
yes, for context.
So, yeah, so it was an oral sex gesture is what it was.
Okay, yeah.
So her mom flipped out naturally,
Mhm.
right? She's like, "Oh my god." And so immediately she said, "I told you not to hang out with those boys down the street." And so anyhow, what I think her daughter might have unintentionally learned in that moment is like she's in trouble for asking
Mm,
a question.
mm,
Okay. But she didn't understand the context of it, right? Like, and so what had happened, the backstory is there was a field trip that day and the kids were on the bus and some boys in a truck did that to the
mhm,
girls on the bus because they thought they'd be funny. Right. So there you go. You can't protect your kids from that. I'm sorry.
mhm,
You can't helicopter over that. And so how do we encourage our kids to come to us with those questions and not shut them down because of like a reaction we're having? Okay. So this is another little sound bite you can take. Okay. When, especially as our kids aren't kids and they're transitioning to becoming young adults, right? And they're becoming teens. One of the things that our parenting style needs to shift. We need to
mhm,
parent our kids a little different. Okay. And one of those shifts is first of all, you want to try to make things their idea as much as possible. So, like, when you're giving, you don't want to give advice, you want to get the advice out of them.
Hmm.
So, like, for example, when you're talking, and they're telling you, "Oh, this girl, my friend, having this trouble, and she didn't call me, and blah blah blah." Just like, don't say, "Well, what you should do is,"
Right.
right, and we want to fix it because we know what they should do because we've been there before. But that's not the best strategy. Plus, we want to teach our kids to critically think and to make decisions themselves and how
Mhm.
to like solve problems on their own. So, our role is not to tell them what we would do, but to walk them through problem solving. Okay. So you got to lead with curiosity before concern. That's my soundbite. I didn't finish.
Mhm.
Lead with curiosity before concern. Usually we're so worried. This mom was so worried. Oh my gosh, what happened? We're
Right.
concerned. Instead, poker face. Oh, that's an interesting
Mhm.
question, honey. Can you tell me more about where you heard that or saw that? So be
Right.
curious. Okay, lead with curiosity before concern. And this is the backstory, right? I told you the backstory about her being on the bus, right? And so then you can calm down. You're like, oh, it's not the boys on the street, right? And then now you can talk about, and by the way, if you do have a reaction, this is what I told the mom to do later, is I said, you can always go back and fix it.
Mhm.
Okay. You can always say, "Hey, honey, yesterday I was cooking and you asked me a question, and the question really surprised me, and I felt like I didn't handle it the way I wanted to, or answer
Mhm.
the way I wanted to, or should have. Can we talk about that again?" And the reason I felt so surprised or I felt so upset is the gesture that you showed me was a really kind of a vulgar one, and it was
Mhm.
it was a sexual one, and so it made me feel a little nervous or scared or what. And be honest with your kids. Tell your kids, I don't have a woman's body, but I will always listen to you and I'll always be there for you.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't know the answer to that question, but we can look it up and I'll find out with you or we can find out together. Okay. So that's what I mean. Like, that's approachable. That's being
Mhm.
open. That's what that looks and sounds like. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's great advice, and I think another thing that is important here is there's a lot of shame
Mm,
around all of this, like, it as a
mhm.
young girl or a young boy, I can imagine, because it feels so taboo, it's almost like, "Oh, it's happening," and it feels, like, sometimes wrong or shameful or awkward, and I think that there's also a great way to start these kinds of conversations by just explaining the human experience, like, what a beautiful thing to transition from young to, a young woman, and this is a really exciting part of life, and it happens to everyone, and boys go through their journey, girls go through their journey, and it's part of growing up, and it's a change, but it's beautiful, and it's part of being human, and just kind of, like, setting that tone for the conversation and then talking about it. I just thought of that as we were talking, but I feel like it's important to acknowledge the fact that when you're coming at it with, or when the daughter is maybe experiencing this shame and guilt and awkwardness, the message doesn't land the same, and then it's always baked in there. So anytime she's going through, like if she does get her period, there's like shame instead of excitement or just awareness. And I think there's these great transitions for transition celebrations for young children, like, you see, like, the bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah or, other types of, like, quinceañeras, right? There's
16.
something yeah, there's, like, a celebration for children becoming young adults, and it comes with this sense of pride for being independent and being responsible, and I think that you can weave those elements into this kinda conversation where you make it a positive thing, and like you said, it's really important to make sure that they know they can come to you for this because if you're not teaching it to them, they are learning it, but they're learning it through another lens, whether it's the internet, like you said, with all kinds of other scary opportunities to learn, or it's their peers, or, it's somebody else. And so it's important for you to be able to have those conversations. And the more that you approach it with just like, this is life, this is human, it's okay.
Yeah.
You're okay. And if you have questions, that's natural. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know, that's just something that I felt, compelled to share there, but I am really, really enjoying this conversation, and I think there's a lot of gold here.
There's so much. I was thinking too while you were talking too. I was like, some of the other things that another thing that this dad said that I just remembered too is that there's also sometimes this like awkwardness that can happen. Like, so he's an instructor, a music instructor, and he said it's like some of his students are becoming like going through puberty and they're getting older, and it's like it feels a little weird because you can see they're developing. I think there's that sense for men of their daughters too. Okay, so you start to see your daughter develop, and I think sometimes the awkwardness is coming from you. Okay. And remember, we set the tone as parents. So watch that because a lot of dads are setting this tone that they're so uncomfortable that it makes your girls uncomfortable. And we're reflecting what you're doing. Okay. But what happens if you don't lead that way? What happens if you aren't so uncomfortable? Okay. Maybe we can not be too, right? And there's so much modeling that's going on, okay? But one of the things I think dads get fearful of is or can tend to do is maybe back off on affection when puberty comes because there's
Mm,
like feeling, I don't know, an awkwardness because they're developing, like I said, right? And you need to be careful of that because it's so confusing to your girls. I remember my dad doing that. And I was
hmm,
like, why doesn't he hug me anymore? Or like, there's this weirdness, like, he never came in my room, which was okay, but, like, why now you stop coming in my room? Like, you could knock or give me privacy still, right? But there and those were some of the things I think, his lens of what he thought he was protecting me, right? But it was confusing to me as his daughter, like, "Well, what's wrong with me?"
mm,
Another thing girls will do too is when they're going from this transition, they're gonna flip-flop between being a little girl and trying to be a woman. So your daughters are gonna be playing with their dolls one day, and then tomorrow they're playing dress up and put makeup and high heels on, and you're gonna be like, "Which one?" There's gonna be that
mhm,
transition, and all kids do this when
mhm.
transitioning, okay? So just know that you'll see that too. And sometimes your girls will flirt with you as your dad. Yeah, sometimes not like in a sexy way, but just like to practice. A little practice of like and they were kind of sometimes learning that like we can be cute and get our way. You know what I mean? So it's like a little bit of that's what I mean, where it's a little bit of flirty. There's a little bit of play with power
Hmm,
with girls
interesting.
as they start to develop and we notice we have a little bit of that too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Huh. Well, you have given so much great advice and perspective, and this has been a really interesting conversation. I feel like we need to do a whole nother hour's worth of talking about
And
this.
that's now already, it's crazy.
I know, I know. I'm like, oh
Yeah,
man.
I talked about life and things and hope that was okay.
Well, yeah. No, this has been a wonderful conversation. But yeah, I would love to just close out with one final piece of advice that you have for the dads out there with daughters.
Oh my gosh, what do I wanna leave you with? Um, I think I really like the leading with the curiosity before concern. I think that's big. And I think just acknowledging that, like, that, like, you don't know everything. Like, who
Mhm.
cares? Doctors don't care. We don't expect you to know it all, and you can acknowledge that and still be present for her. So I don't know all the answers, and I've never had a period. I'm not sure everything you might need, but I can find out. I
Right.
can call my sister, or right. You can be resourceful, figure it out. But I think it's such a blessing when, um, if your daughter can if you can go to the store and go get her products and not feel weird about it, okay? That's something like that, something that simple. Like, I remember asking my husband to do that, and it was so powerful because he said he doesn't even know this. It was so powerful to me because I felt shame asking him to have to go to get
Mhm.
tampons for me, and he says, "Well, they know they're not for me." It's like, what a great attitude, right? Like,
Yeah.
they know they're not for you, like, so what? And that's
Mhm.
the thing is if you can have that kinda tone, yeah, so what? Bodies do this, and
Mhm. Mhm.
I think that's such a beautiful gift, and also to allow your daughters or your kids in general to make mistakes, and you can also do that by, like, when you tell stories of you making mistakes too.
Mhm.
'Cause that's, like, so much freedom to your kids to, like, not get it right every time. Cause like, sometimes there's so much pressure, they don't wanna disappoint you, right?
Right.
You wanna do good, and so, I mean, it's one of the most powerful things I remember my dad doing. I don't cry. Um, when I was 18, my, car got stolen, and I was somewhere I probably shouldn't have been. Okay, so I was, like, really scared to tell my dad my car was gone. And when I called him and told him, he told me a story of him losing his car at the airport. And he's like, I just misplaced it. Like, I thought I parked here, but I really parked there. And so he told me the story. He says, Jennifer, let's get in the car and let's go to where you think your car was. And
Mhm.
let's go see if, like, maybe you parked it somewhere else. Okay. So just that story was like, I felt so much better.
Mm.
And just like to know that, like, he wasn't gonna, like, lecture me right away. I wasn't ready to
Mhm.
myself. I was ready
Mhm.
for shame and, like, "Oh my gosh, like, I knew something I shouldn't have done, and I'm paying the price," right? And
Mhm.
if you can just let your kids know that, like, we all make mistakes,
Mhm.
and what the most important thing is we reflect on those, and we look for the lessons in those, and we look at, like,
Yeah.
what we wanna do better next time, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're modeling for our kids. If you can do that, they're gonna talk to you more.
Yeah.
They're gonna talk to you more. Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jen. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for this. And yeah, I'll have to have you back on. Honestly, this has been really good.
So thank you. I appreciate it.